There are things you do not understand about a person until you are in the room with them at the wrong moment. Not the wrong moment in a dramatic sense, not a crisis, not a confrontation. The wrong moment in the quieter sense. The moment before something ends, when the person does not know it is ending, and you do not quite know it either. But the air in the room has a quality that is different from ordinary air, and you will remember it for the rest of your life. A crew member named Robert Salas spent 4 years working on Michael Jackson's concert tours. He was a stage carpenter, one of the people responsible for the physical infrastructure of the show, the platforms and risers and set pieces that the performers moved across during the production. He had worked on dozens of tours before Michael Jackson's, and he would work on dozens after. He was not a fan in any unusual sense. He was a professional. He liked the music. He was good at his job. He was the kind of person who builds the stage and watches the show from the wings and goes home. He watched Michael Jackson's last full rehearsal for a tour that never happened. The production had been in rehearsal at the Staples Center in Los Angeles for several months. The scale of the production was significant. The same kind of ambition that had characterized everything Michael Jackson had done at the height of his career. The same belief that a concert could be an event of a different order than anything the audience expected. Robert Salas had been with the production since the early rehearsal phase. He had watched the show take shape over weeks, the set pieces being positioned, the lighting cues being programmed, the choreography being refined. He had watched Michael Jackson move through the Staples Center at various stages of the process, sometimes in full rehearsal and sometimes in pieces, stopping and starting and working things out. He described Michael's approach to the rehearsal process as different from anyone else he had worked with. Not more demanding, not more difficult, different. Michael moved through a rehearsal the way a painter moves through a canvas that is almost finished. Slowly, with the specific kind of attention that is looking for what is still not right, rather than for what is already working. He was precise about the things that mattered to him, the technical elements of the performance, the relationship between his movement and the lighting cues, the specific quality of sound in a room of that size. He was patient in a way that Robert Salas did not expect from someone of his stature. He did not behave like someone who had already done this 100 times. He behaved like someone for whom the performance still mattered in a specific and personal way. The year was 2009. The tour was called This Is It. 50 planned performances at the O2 Arena in London. A return to the stage after more than a decade away from touring. Michael Jackson was 50 years old. He had not performed in front of a live audience in the full concert sense since the History World Tour had ended in 1997, 12 years earlier. The shows at the O2 were going to be his return. Not a small return, not a tentative one, but 50 nights in one of the largest indoor venues in the world. For Michael Jackson, the return was complicated. 12 years away from touring meant 12 years of the world continuing without the specific thing that live performance had always given him: the immediate, physical relationship between his movement and a crowd's response. He had made music during those years. He had not performed in front of large audiences. The people who were closest to him in the production described him, in those early months of 2009, as someone who was rediscovering something he had kept in a specific internal place for a long time. Not nervous, exactly. More like someone who had been away from something essential and was in the process of coming back to it. The music was one of the songs he had heard dozens of times in the previous months of rehearsal. The production was running the same way it always ran. But something in the quality of the moment made him stop what he was doing and look at the stage. Michael Jackson was singing Man in the Mirror. Not fully, not the complete performance, but the shape of it, the emotional center of it, standing at the center of the stage in the specific quality of light that the show had been designed around. The arrangement was sparse in that moment, the band holding back, the production breathing. And Michael was inside it. Not running through it, not pacing it, but inside it in the way that Robert Salas had seen him be inside certain moments during certain rehearsals. Fully present, the song working through him rather than being performed by him. Robert Salas set down his tools. He watched for 4 minutes. The last full run-through that Robert Salas witnessed was on a Thursday evening in late June of 2009. The production was close to ready. The technical elements had been largely locked. Michael was going through the show in the full production version, with the lights and the costumes and the full band for one of the final times before the tour began. Robert Salas was on the stage floor, in the section to the left of the main platform, checking a seam in the staging material that had been flagging slightly. The kind of small structural detail that nobody in the audience would ever see or notice, but that a stage carpenter notices and corrects because it is his job and because he takes his job seriously. He was working on the seam when the music started. He looked up. This was not the first time he had been surprised by Michael Jackson in rehearsal. He had seen Michael on 2 or 3 occasions during the previous weeks do something in the middle of a technical run-through that stopped whatever was happening around it. A specific phrase, a specific movement, a moment where the rehearsal ceased to be a rehearsal and became something else, briefly, before returning to the ordinary business of preparing a show. Robert Salas had noticed these moments without attaching particular significance to them. They were simply part of how Michael Jackson worked. He carried the full performance inside him, even when the full performance was not what the session was supposed to be. He could not have said, later, exactly what made him stop working. He did not know, standing there on the stage floor with his tools on the ground, that he was watching the last full rehearsal Michael Jackson would ever give. He did not know that Michael Jackson would die 3 weeks later on June 25th, before the first O2 performance. He did not know that the shows would never happen, that the stage they had been building together for months would be dismantled without ever hosting an audience, that the 50 nights in London would remain 50 empty dates. He did not know any of that. He just knew that he was watching something he needed to watch. When Man in the Mirror ended, Michael moved to the side of the stage to speak with his musical director. Robert Salas picked up his tools. He finished working on the seam. He went home. In the months after Michael Jackson's death, as the production footage was assembled into the documentary This Is It, Robert Salas watched the film in a theater by himself on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in a city where the theaters were not crowded. He watched the rehearsal footage. He saw Michael Jackson on the stage he had helped build. He heard the music he had heard dozens of times in the months before June. He watched the performances that had been filmed during the rehearsal period. He left the theater and sat in his car for 20 minutes. He did not start the engine. He sat in the quiet of the parking structure and thought about the Thursday evening at the Staples Center, about the seam in the staging material, about the moment he had looked up. He thought about the fact that he had set down his tools. He had never set down his tools mid-task before. Not once in 4 years on that production. Not once in the many tours before it. He would say later that he did not know what made him watch. He was not, as he said, the sentimental type. He had seen a lot of performances. He had seen a lot of performers. But there was something about watching Michael Jackson perform that particular song in that particular rehearsal on that particular Thursday evening in June that held him in a way he could not fully account for. He described it as the feeling you get when you are looking at something that is complete, not finished, but complete, the way a room can be complete before anyone moves the furniture. The other people on the stage floor that evening were occupied with their own work. The technical director was in the production booth. The band was assembled at their positions, working through the arrangement. There were perhaps 30 people in the building, scattered across their various responsibilities, doing the specific things that a production crew does in the final weeks before a tour begins. Nobody else stopped. Nobody else put down their tools and stood still and watched. Robert Salas was the only person in the building in that moment who was simply present for what was happening on the stage. He did not understand, until much later, what that had meant. Not a privilege, exactly, a different thing. The particular accident of being in the right place at the right time for a moment that would never be repeated, doing the kind of work that puts you close to something without being part of it, so that you are both inside and outside the moment at the same time. He said, in the years after, that watching the film was not the same as having been there. He said the film was good, that it captured something real, that he understood why people found it meaningful. But he said there was something about being in the room, about being on that stage floor, with his tools in his hands, hearing the sound coming through the rehearsal monitors, watching the light land on the performer 30 feet away from him, that no film could carry. He said, "There are things that belong to the people who were in the room." The 50 nights at the O2 would have been, by any reasonable measure, one of the great concert runs in the history of popular music. The production that had been assembled, the staging, the technology, the ambition of what Michael Jackson and his team had been building in those months of rehearsal was unlike anything that had been attempted in live performance before. The crew knew it. They had been building it. They understood, in the specific way that production people understand things, that the show they were constructing was exceptional. None of it happened. The stage was built and dismantled. The dates were canceled. The crew went home. Robert Salas went home too. He carried what he had seen on that Thursday evening, not the footage, not the recording, but the specific experience of having been on that stage floor at that hour, watching a performer do the thing he had been made to do in a room that was empty except for the people who were building the space for it. The space never filled. But the performance happened anyway, in that rehearsal, in that quiet, in that final, incomplete Thursday before everything stopped. Michael Jackson performed Man in the Mirror in that rehearsal, as if the room were full, as if 50,000 people were watching from seats that were not yet there, in London, on a night that would now never come. He performed it as if it mattered, because it did, because it always had. That is what Robert Salas carried out of the Staples Center on that Thursday evening. He did not know its weight yet. He would understand it later, slowly, over the years that followed, what it had meant to be in that room, on that stage, at that hour, holding tools he did not use, watching a man sing a song to an empty building that had every intention of filling theaters for 50 nights. He had been there. He had seen it with his own eyes, standing on the floor of that stage with his tools beside him while the building was quiet except for the music. That was enough, and more than enough, and not enough at all.